Welcome to the infamous edition of the Headstones and Microphones, where we use AI to step into the past through a researched first-person simulation done through creative storytelling of history's most infamous people. Now, let's meet our guest. Welcome to the podcast. Let's start at the absolute beginning, where the public narrative hasn't yet distorted who you were. When and where were you born, and what was your given name?
I was born Bernard Lawrence Madoff on April 29th, 1938, right in Queens, New York.
What was your hometown and home life like as a child?
I grew up in Laurelton, which was a middle-class, predominantly Jewish neighborhood in Queens. My parents were Ralph and Sylvia Madoff. My father was the son of Polish immigrants and worked as a plumber for many years, while my mother was a homemaker. Later on, they actually tried their hand at finance, running a broker-dealer operation called Gibraltar Securities right out of our house. It wasn't very successful, though, and the SEC eventually closed it down because they failed to file the proper reports.
Was there a story behind your name or a nickname that stuck with you?
Most people just knew me as Bernie. That's the name that followed me from the streets of Queens all the way to Wall Street.
What were you like as a child, and how many years of schooling did you actually attend?
I was pretty driven, even back then. I attended Far Rockaway High School, where I was on the swim team and met my wife, Ruth. I graduated in 1956 and went off to the University of Alabama for a year before transferring closer to home at Hofstra University. I graduated from Hofstra in 1960 with a bachelor's degree in political science. After that, I briefly enrolled at Brooklyn Law School, but I didn't stick with it long because my mind was already set on the financial world.
What's a decision that changed everything for you, but felt small at the time?
In 1960, I decided to start my own investment firm, Bernard L. Madoff Investment and Securities, LLC. To get it off the ground, I used $5,000 I had saved up from working as a lifeguard at the Silver Point Beach Club and a side gig installing sprinkler systems. I also borrowed another $50,000 from my in-laws and set up shop right inside my father-in-law's accounting office in Manhattan. It seemed like a modest, scrappy start, dealing in penny stocks and taking the crumbs the big firms didn't want. But it laid the foundation for everything that followed.
Let's talk about your early run-ins with the law. Before the world knew your name for your most infamous actions, what was your very first arrest or interaction with law enforcement? And what were the consequences?
Interestingly enough, I didn't have a record of juvenile arrests or early run-ins with the police. For decades, I operated completely above board in the legitimate side of my business. My very first actual arrest didn't come until the absolute end, on December 11th, 2008, when the entire structure collapsed. The consequence of that single interaction was the immediate end of my freedom and my life as I knew it.
At what moment did you realize your name would never be forgotten?
It was in December 2008. The global financial crisis hit, the markets were crashing, and my investors frantically started demanding their money back. They wanted to withdraw around $7 billion. But the reality was that the money wasn't there. I only had a few $100 million left in the bank. When I finally confessed to my family and the FBI showed up at my Manhattan apartment, the news broke nationally and globally. Watching the media explosion and realizing the sheer scale of the multi-billion-dollar fraud, that was the moment I knew my name was permanently cemented in history.
Did fame make you more dangerous, or did it simply expose who you already were?
The credibility and prestige I've built over the years certainly made the deception easier to sustain. I became a highly respected Wall Street expert and even served 3 terms as the chairman of the NASDAQ stock exchange. That level of trust and status blinded people. It allowed me to attract massive institutional funds, charities, and high-profile celebrities. The status didn't change my underlying actions, but it gave me a massive stage to scale the operation to a level the world had never seen before.
Who do you believe betrayed you first? A person, society, or your own instincts?
In the end, it was my own family who turned me in, but only because I forced their hand. By December 2008, I knew I was at the end of my rope. I confessed to my sons, Mark and Andrew, that my investment advisory business was nothing but a giant lie, a Ponzi scheme. They immediately went to a lawyer, and their lawyer contacted the authorities. But truthfully, it was my own instincts and the unworkable math of the scheme that betrayed me first. I kept digging a hole I couldn't get out of.
What was your most unique habit or a random fact about you that would surprise people?
People might be surprised to learn that alongside the fraudulent advisory business, my firm ran a highly legitimate, pioneering electronic trading operation. My brother Peter and I helped build early electronic trading capabilities. What I joked was like early artificial intelligence to process massive order flows. By the late 1980s, that legitimate side of the business was legally making around $100 million a year, and we were processing a massive percentage of the New York Stock Exchange's order flow.
What did the public never understand about the pressure you were under at the time?
When you are running an operation like that, you are constantly on a treadmill you can never step off. To keep the illusion alive, you always need a continuous stream of new investor capital to pay off the older ones. The pressure to maintain those steady positive returns, even when the markets are completely bottoming out, is an agonizing, non-stop weight. In statements later on, I admitted that I had suffered through it and that the trap was entirely of my own making.
Did you have any known rivalries that defined your career?
My primary adversaries weren't rival financial barons, but the regulatory bodies and the changing mechanics of the market itself. For years, I managed to clear hurdles and pass regulatory reviews by the SEC. However, the game changed significantly in 2001 when the New York Stock Exchange shifted from fractional share trades to decimals. That shift severely cut into our legitimate market-making profits, which accelerated the pressures on the fraudulent side of the business.
What personal battles were you fighting privately while the world was watching?
While the public saw a confident, wealthy financial titan living in a Manhattan penthouse or vacationing on yachts, I was privately managing a crushing double life. I was maintaining completely separate, falsified books for the advisory business that my own sons and most of my staff supposedly knew nothing about. The intense legal and logistical maneuvering required to keep the SEC from uncovering the truth during their investigations was a constant, exhausting backroom battle.
What was your darkest moment, and was there ever a time you wanted to walk away from it?
The darkest period was the week after Thanksgiving in 2008. My primary Chase Manhattan bank account, which had held billions, plummeted to just over $230 million. With the global banking system locked up, I knew I couldn't borrow my way out. On December 4, I pulled my associate Frank DePascali aside and told him plainly that I was finished. I knew the game was completely over, and there was no way to walk away quietly.
What truth was hardest to escape when you were alone at night?
The hardest truth was knowing that I hadn't actually invested a single dime of my clients' funds. Every dollar that came in was simply deposited straight into a bank account to pay out other withdrawals or fuel a luxurious lifestyle. When I sat alone, I had to face the reality that the entire empire was built on a vacuum, and it was only a matter of time before it all came crashing down.
When the law finally closed in, how exactly were you brought to justice? Walk me through the final arrest, the charges that ultimately stuck, and the legal outcome of your trials.
The FBI came straight to my apartment on December 11th, 2008, after my sons reported me. They asked if there was an innocent explanation, and I told them directly that there wasn't, and that I had been running a massive Ponzi scheme. In March 2009, I chose to plead guilty to 11 federal felony counts, including securities fraud, money laundering, mail fraud, and perjury. I didn't offer a defense or seek a plea bargain. The judge called my actions extraordinarily evil and handed down the absolute maximum: 150 years in federal prison, along with a massive financial forfeiture.
What's the craziest rumor ever told about you, and what part of your story has been exaggerated the most?
The biggest exaggeration was the idea that I had some magical, complex investment strategy that allowed me to beat the market with split-strike conversion options. I even told the Wall Street Journal in 1992 that my steady 10 to 12% returns were nothing special compared to the S&P average at the time. The crazy reality was that there was no complex strategy at all. It was just an incredibly basic, old-school Ponzi scheme hidden behind a wall of trusted reputation.
What is the biggest misconception people have about your life?
People often assume that everyone around me, including my family, must have been entirely in on the fraud from day one because they worked at the firm. I remained adamant that I operated the advisory side alone and kept them in the dark about the mechanics of the scheme. My wife was never charged, and my sons were the ones who ultimately reported me to the authorities when they found out.
What would surprise people most about your ordinary human side?
Before the wealth and the infamy, I lived a remarkably ordinary middle-class life. I was a regular kid from Queens who spent his summers working hard as a lifeguard and installing lawn sprinklers just to save up enough money to start a business and build a life with my high school sweetheart.
When, where, and how did you pass away?
I passed away on April 14th, 2021 at the age of 82. I died of natural causes stemming from terminal chronic kidney disease while serving out my sentence at the Federal Medical Center in Butner, North Carolina.
Was your downfall caused more by your own flaws or by the world changing around you?
It was a combination of both. The systemic flaw was entirely mine. You cannot maintain a fraud of that nature indefinitely. But the catalyst that finally broke it was the world changing around me. The 2008 global financial crisis and the collapse of Lehman Brothers created a market panic. That panic caused an unprecedented avalanche of withdrawal requests that no Ponzi scheme on earth could have survived.
What past regrets did you carry with you to the end? If you could erase one decision from your life, would you? Or was it necessary to become who you were?
In an interview from custody near the end of my life, I expressed deep remorse for the devastation I caused. My actions destroyed the lives of thousands of victims, ordinary people, charities, and close friends who lost their life savings. If I could erase the decision to turn down the path of fraud in the 1990s, I would do it in a heartbeat. The destruction left in my wake was absolutely not worth the legacy or the lifestyle.
What scared you more? Getting caught, losing power, or being forgotten?
The psychological pattern of keeping the lie going for decades shows that the absolute terror of getting caught and facing the immediate exposure of the fraud was what drove me every single day. I fought desperately to prevent that exposure until the bank account literally hit zero.
When you look back now, do you see yourself as the villain, the hero, or something in between?
There is no something in between here. I spent years pretending to be an investment sage and a pillar of the financial community. But the historical record is perfectly clear. I operated the largest investor fraud in history and caused extraordinary harm. I am, without question, the villain of this story.
Do you have any closing remarks about the interview or the stories you shared that you would like to share with the listeners before we sign off?
Just that the truth always catches up to you. You can build the most elaborate illusion in the world, but eventually, the foundation will crumble. I appreciate the chance to lay out the facts clearly.
And that wraps up another conversation from Beyond the Grave. Thanks for joining us on the Headstones and Microphones podcast. Remember, do better with the life you have been given and choose to do good in this life. Please help spread the word by sharing and following the pod.